In this short video, I'd like to introduce melody and some vocabulary associated with it. Well, first of all, what is melody? Well, melody is defined in our book as a series of notes arranged in order to form a distinctive, recognizable unit. Well, what it is it's the tune. It's the part that we sing along with. Melody is made up of these individual units of sound called pitches, and that's what we're going to look at in just a second here. Each pitch would last a certain duration of time. Okay, so based on melody being defined as a series of notes, take a look at this next slide and tell me which part you think is the melody, the top part or the bottom part. Well, since melody is made up of a series of pitches, that means that it's going to be moving through time. It's going to begin, move, and end. And if you think it's the top part, you're right. Melodies are usually placed higher up. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's the way it usually is. So the top part is the melody. We read it just like we read English from left to right. And the bottom, those are actually notes that create harmony. The harmony is there to provide depth and added richness to the melody. Pitch is the relative position, high or low, of a musical sound. Now, another name for pitch is frequency, and the faster the frequency of a vibration, the higher the pitch is going to sound. The lower or I should say the slower the vibration, the lower the pitch is going to sound. Let's start by looking at a piano keyboard, or at least part of a piano keyboard, because I know you guys have all seen one before. You'll see how the musical alphabet is just like our alphabet, but instead of going from A to Z, we go from A to G, and then it just keeps repeating itself. Why does this picture start on a C and go up to a C? Well, that's because when you start on C and you play the white notes here, you get what's called a major scale, and it sounds really nice. If you start on any of the other letters or pitches, you won't get that same sound. It sounds nice, but it doesn't have that feeling of arrival when you get up to the octave. So let me start on A. I'm going to start on the A. We don't really have enough piano here, but use your imagination, and as if we have a little more keyboard to the left. There's A, B, here's C, the one I started on before, D, E, F, G, A. And there we get what's called the minor scale, or one form of it. If you look in your book on page 21, that's the 7th edition, or on page 24 for the 6th edition, what you see is a little bit more piano. It's still not a full-size keyboard. A full-size piano has 88 keys, but this gives you an idea of that repeating pattern, the alternating sets of 3 black keys and 2 black keys, and then also how the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on, how they correspond to those notes on the piano. Seeing a larger section of the piano here is a nice visual that shows the wide range of pitches that are available. Above the piano, we see something called the grand staff with the corresponding pitches written out in traditional music notation. If you play an instrument like the piano, you would read music off of the grand staff. Imagine 88 keys from the low notes all the way up to the high ones. You would need a lot of space to notate such a wide pitch range. Notice right in the middle there's a note called middle C, and that's what joins the clefs together. While the piano requires a grand staff, for a single vocal part or an instrument, a melody could easily be placed on either one of these two clefs, either in the treble clef or the bass clef. Well, here's a picture of a small slice of piano, and above it we see a scale written out, and that thing that looks kind of like an ampersand is the treble clef sign. Treble clef is also known as G clef. You guys don't have to read music for this class, but I'm going to show you how to here real quick. The hint with G clef or treble clef is that swirly line goes around the second line of what's called the musical staff. And if you remember that its treble clef is also called G clef, then you'll remember that that second line is a G. So that's your reference point. The second line of the staff is G. So that means anything that's written above it, you're going to be going up in pitch. Remember that G is the last letter of the musical alphabet. So it's not, if you're looking at G, the next pitch above it, that is to the right, is not going to be an H, but it's going to go back to being an A. And then up to the next pitch is going to be a B. The next pitch is going to be a C, and it's not written here, but if we went up another one, it would be a D, and so on. Go back to G. The note that's written below that, since it's written as a lower pitch, you would go backwards in terms of the letter. So that would be an F, and so on. And it goes all the way down here in this picture to middle C. Middle C, as you can see, no pun intended, has a little line that's written through it, and that's because there's not a sixth line on the musical staff. In order to extend the pitches here, you need to write what's called a ledger line. So middle C is the first pitch below the staff that requires a ledger line. Instruments that would read off this clef would be the treble instruments, like, well, can you think of any? These would be the higher pitched instruments, like, well, violin, flute, oboe, clarinet, trumpet, if you sing soprano or alto, and so on, the higher pitched instruments. So the violin can actually play the G below the C that's written here. And so it would require writing in a couple more, or one more ledger line in a space below that C to notate the G, but that would be the lowest note. And of course violins can play really, really high, so you would also require ledger lines to notate, and other symbols to notate the higher pitches. And I'm going to let you guys investigate that on your own if you're interested. But this is the clef that a treble instrument would read off of. Some hints to help you remember, if you're interested, to remember identifying pitches in treble clef are notes that are placed on the spaces like this spell face. Remember, the second line on the staff in treble clef is G. So that means that the A is on the second space and the F below that G, well, it's on the first space, so F-A-C-E. And for the notes that are on the lines, it's E, G, B, D, F, or every good boy does fine. Okay, this slide shows you a picture of bass clef with some notes written on it. The point of reference in bass clef is the fourth line. It's got those two dots that surround it. The fourth line is an F. So that means that if you go up a note, you're going to go to a G. You go up another note, an A. Up another note, you're getting to B. And unfortunately, it doesn't show a picture of the next note, which would be C. It would have a ledger line through it, just like we saw in the treble clef. But in this case, it would be the first note above the staff with a ledger line, and that actually would be middle C. That would be the same pitch that we saw at the bottom of the treble clef. Anyway, if you go below F, the notes that are written below F, you have to go backwards because they're written below it. The instruments that read off this clef would be the lower sounding instruments like the string bass, cello, trombone, bassoon. The bass clarinet actually would read off of treble clef, so that's a little bit different. Let's go back to helpful hints that will show you how to remember these pitches pretty quickly if you're interested. Okay, remember in bass clef that that fourth line, the one that has you've got the clef sign that looks like half of a heart, and then there's two dots. The fourth line is an F. So that means that the pitch below the F is an E, and the pitch above it is a G. If you go down to the first space, that's an A. All, A-C-E-G, all cars eat gas, or all cows eat grass is how I learned it. And then the spaces are the lines are G, B, D, F, A. I learned good boys do fine always. I like this one, good burritos don't fall apart. Anyway, that's some quick ways to remember the pitches and the clefs if you're interested. Well, that's almost everything you need to know about pitch, except that we didn't talk about the black keys on the piano yet. Do you remember earlier when I started on C and I played the scale? Sounds really nice. That's the major scale. If you start on any of the other notes, let's say D for example, and you just play the white keys D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, it doesn't really sound the same. It doesn't have that feeling of gravitation to the octave note. If I start on G, it almost sounds right. And some of you might be able to hear that if I just change one note, that it sounds right. And that's because I raised the F to an F sharp. The way that the black keys on the piano are named is by either raising the pitch with a sharp. That would be the first black key here that's shown is a C sharp. or you can also lower the D to a D flat. What sharp signs do, they look like little number signs, is they raise a pitch what's called a half step. That's the smallest distance that you can go on the piano. C sharp and D flat are the same note, they just have a different spelling. And it's just like in our language, when we have words that sound the same but have different spellings, it's, you know, the right spelling when you have the right context. So don't worry about that. But anyway, you'll see that that's how these black keys are named. A D sharp is the same as an E flat. Notice between the E and the F and the B and the C that there aren't any black keys. So actually, if you sharp an E, it's the same as an F. And if you flat an F, it's the same as an E. An F sharp and G flat are the same. A G sharp and A flat are the same, and so on. So while the sharp sign looks like a little number sign, the flat, I don't know if you can see it very well on this slide, but the flat looks like a little B with a pointy bottom. Most Western melodies are built on the notes of the major or minor scale. And what's shown, pictured here, is the C major scale. This one is really the easiest because it's just the white keys starting on C up to the octave. A scale is a fixed pattern of tones within the octave that ascends and descends. We only see the ascending scale, but when we musicians practice these, we practice going up and down. As we saw earlier, if you start on any note other than C and play the white keys, you're going to need sharps or flats for it to sound right. I put a couple resources in this week's module. The first thing is in the reading. If you look on page 23 in the new edition of the book, it'll show you the formulas for constructing major and minor scales. Now, I would never make you do that on a test, but that's just to show you that there is a pattern and that it depends what note you start on. Also, there's a very short and really clear video that shows actually how to build scales on the piano keyboard. So if you're interested, check that out. It's actually quite straightforward. As I mentioned, most melodies come out of the major or minor scale, and because the patterns of construction are different, they just have a completely different sound. So do practice listening exercise 2.3. There's a link to it in the weekly module, and this way you can practice hearing the difference between major and minor. Melodies that are built on the major scale are sometimes described as sounding kind of bright. Melodies that are built on the minor scale are sometimes described as sounding kind of dark or sad. So that's what listening exercise 2.3 is for. It's to practice hearing some excerpts from some pieces and listening for whether you think they're major or minor. So try that out. And I also want to encourage you, because I can't always tell. And if you're at a classical concert, a lot of times the key of the piece is in the title. For example, Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 in C minor, or Beethoven's Symphony No. 6 in F major. Okay, in this last picture here, we see two different kinds of scales, the diatonic versus the chromatic scale. The diatonic scale is made up of 7 notes plus the octave, and we see the C major scale as a model, but actually both major and minor scales are diatonic scales. They're made up of 7 notes plus the octave, and both of those kinds of scales have this feeling of gravitational pull towards a central note, also known as the tonic. And you'll see that word again when you get into the material on harmony. That central tone is called the tonic. The other kind of scale pictured here is known as the chromatic scale, and that chroma means color because of the additional 5 notes that you get. So sometimes you'll hear in a piece of music this use of chromaticism. In a chromatic scale, all of the pitches are equidistant. They're all half steps apart. So if you count all of the possible pitches that occur within the octave, you come up with 12. You may notice when listening to the chromatic scale, it doesn't have that same kind of feeling of gravitation towards a central tone, and that's because the pitches are equidistant. All right, well, that's it for now. I hope you found the information in this short video helpful.